created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
Hi, everybody. Today we are starting a new series in this We Love Singing project. Today's recording, our today's first recording for this new cycle, is going to. I was planning to share with you, assuming not all of you are that familiar with the latest developments in AI. I am speaking in particular or referring to ChatGPT. And I was planning on sharing it with you as, one of the most interesting uh, advances or that demonstrate the progress that we have achieved as humanity in the AI, artificial intelligence. That's what I was planning to do. But as I reflected on it more and more, and since the progress in artificial intelligence has evolved very rapidly, now I am afraid that this program and whatever I am sharing with you today will get old very quickly. As of now, we are in October 2023. We cannot be certain on when you would be listening to this program. Probably, if you are one of the closest followers who are up to date, as soon as I publish or I get published one of the programs, you listen to it within days. Then you may to it still in 2023. But it also happens that as more listeners are adding to this group that follows the series of these programs, you might well be end up listening to it in 2024 or maybe even later, because you know that once something reaches the cloud, the internet, it usually never disappears. So when will you listen to it? Maybe 2025, and you will listen to this program and you will say, oh no, the content of this program using ChatGPT sounds so very old school that I cannot believe someone recorded a program taking it as one of the main corners for discussion. So with all that being said in advance, and no matter when you're listening to it, please take into account October 2023. I will be referring, because the ChatGPT version that I used is 3.5. Of course, it also says that it is the September 25 version. I wanted to talk a little about this ChatGPT. ChatGPT, for many people, has been a very important progress in artificial intelligence. For not all people are that enthusiastic about that progress. And so I told myself that it would be a very good idea to contrast, to understand how it is getting the information and how valuable would it be for a person who wants to learn about a given opera composer. So that's what this series is about. We will use ChatGPT to see if we can learn about a given opera composer, and if not, what the missing parts or lack of, I will be giving you more details on that, or lack of information, or what it seems to be based on. I also want to mention it because not everybody is familiar with what it does. This artificial intelligence is fed with thousands, if not millions, of articles of a given subject. So it learns, discovers, summarizes, proposes answers, and it seems to be able to infer, based on existing data, a proposed result. And I would like to say it seems, because once you talk to specialists, you will then realize, or you can find a good number of articles already in the internet telling about the faults in the information. This tool seems to be biased, and we will see how biased it is, at least as now that we are starting with our very much loved Giuseppe Verdi. So, if you are ready to start, and before we get started, I want to invite you to keep sending us an email to operawillofsinging@gmail.com, operawillofsinging@gmail.com. Of course, this new series is somehow based on the proposal that I made a couple of months ago on you telling or what you would be the coming series to be about. Okay, so the series is about um, important composers, important opera composers, and their biographies, and much more to learn. This is the series that we are starting now. Send us an email and don't forget to indicate on whether you would like to get a response in the program or you would like to get a response in private. Opera Will of Singing at gmail.com. Opera Will of Singing at gmail.com. So, getting started. First thing that I asked is please present a summary of or a biography of Giuseppe Verdi in 500 words. There is, I would like to go over the response with you now. What I would like to first say is that it has very few important information, and most of the information that is provided is very shallow. The first, I told myself maybe with this first inquiry around presenting Giuseppe Verdi in 500 words, I get my life resolved. Of course, many people or people who have interacted with ChatGPT know that it also depends on how you ask and how many or additional cues you add to your query. So I could say present an advanced 500 words text on Giuseppe Verdi or a variation of that. So mine didn't include anything. So what I got in return was a very shallow one. And let me share with you what ChatGPT shares with us around Maestro Giuseppe Verdi. Maestro Giuseppe Verdi was born year 1813. You know, he was just getting born when Rossini was already a rock star or an opera star, if you prefer. Rossini and the composition of La Cenerentola and Il Barbiere di Siviglia are around that decade. The independence in Latin America started in several countries in the 1811s. So, in one part of the world, we had Latin America reclaiming their independence, Rossini already in the peak of his fame, and Maestro Giuseppe Verdi was just being born. As you may be aware, Maestro Giuseppe Verdi died in 1901, just 1 year after the new century had started. Maestro Verdi, and it's very important to mention, thanks ChatGPT that I mentioned, was born in a small Italian village. That is important to say because he was not born in one of the important cities of Italy. He is not born in London. He is not born in Paris. So the first things that they say, and this is me speaking, not ChatGPT, many people say that his style of composition is rude, is not fine, because it is how the very young Giuseppe Verdi gets his first impressions of life. And these are the lives of a peasant, these are lives of poor people, these are lives of people with very little education. Maestro Verdi was not fortunate to have been born in a wealthy family. He, as many other peasants in the village, and his family, of course, had to work in the fields to get some money out of what they harvested. That gives a very special feeling to Maestro Giuseppe Verdi on what it takes to gain your food. Life was not resolved for him, and also he is in immediate contact with nature. He is in immediate contact with society. He knows what the motivations of poor people are. Unfortunately, this is not mentioned in ChatGPT. Let's keep moving. So, but ChatGPT mentions that he was born in the small village of Le Roncole in 1813, of course, and Chat mentions something that is very important. Maestro Verdi suffered of a good number of rejections before becoming the great Giuseppe Verdi that we know now. Not only was he born in a small village and was he poor, but also he suffered of rejections, one of them being the most important, that he was rejected from the Milan Conservatory. This comes from ChatGPT. Yes, he was rejected. He was not accepted because he was considered already too old and with very little and poor musical understanding to have a successful career in music itself. How much it hurt Maestro Verdi, ChatGPT does not tell. But of course, and it is not mentioned in ChatGPT either, Maestro Verdi would not stop with just that rejection. He kept moving, and it took him, and let me give you the date of Nabucco based on ChatGPT. The date of Nabucco is 1842, which means he was already 29 years when he got his first success with Nabucco. Nabucco, of which was one of the last titles that we shared in our previous series of We Love Singing when we talked about Parlons de Nabucco. Also, ChatGPT mentions Hernani. We will go back to Hernani a little later. Hernani also gave him some fame to keep making progress, which is correct. ChatGPT tells us about that Nabucco has the very famous score, the Va Pensiero, of which we have talked in the Nabucco program as well. And there is something important that it mentions and that I also mentioned in that program, because the Va Pensiero was more than just a musical success. It says, and I quote, "It became an anthem for the Italian Risorgimento movement, which sought the country's unification." Back to that program, I shared with you that even though the Va Pensiero makes reference to the exiled people, the exiled heroes from their land, it can now be understood as an anthem for many people who have suffered of the power, who have been victims by the people of power, and that would still keep the Va Pensiero alive. Moving on, the answer from ChatGPT also tells us a little about what ChatGPT says is the middle period of Verdi's career, which in fact is, we know, outside from whatever ChatGPT says, that Maestro Verdi had 3 key successes then, which mark a complete, if you allow me to use the word, change or upgrade in his career when he composes his 3 most represented operas. Of course, I am talking about Rigoletto, 1851, Il Trovatore, 2 years after, and La Traviata, same year as Il Trovatore, 1853. ChatGPT says the 3 of them exhibit Verdi's genius in merging drama with lyrical beauty, displaying a deep understanding of human emotion and conflict. This is one of the things that I feel are very shallow in the response of ChatGPT. Even though it is true, I think it is way too brief to just share a couple of sentences around the major successes that are Rigoletto, Trovatore, and La Traviata. ChatGPT also shares with us that he continued evolving, of course, composers that have had such a length in their careers, because Verdi's career was extensive when compared to other composers. Verdi, in fact, lived many years. His later compositions, Aida 1851, and please notice that Aida is 20 years later after Rigoletto. 20 years to get this success and this change in the style of composition of Verdi, which of course for many of you is well known, and ChatGPT mentions it, is commissioned for the opening of the Suez Canal. And says no more that it's a grand spectacle. We will go back to that. While Othello 1887, if you do the math, you will notice that if Aida is 1871, Othello 1887 means 16 years have passed between Othello and Aida. If you compare now Othello 1887 with Rigoletto, then it turns out that 36 years have passed. What do 36 years make to the life of a man? Of course, you can go for the easy answer and say, well, 36 years, well, make people more experienced. Of course, you have grown older. Of course, you have lost some of the stamina that you had inside yourself. And also we have the last opera by Maestro Verdi, mentioned here, Falstaff 1893. 6 years after Othello. The latest two, Othello and Falstaff, are masterful adaptations of Shakespearean plays, blending the drama of the bard with Verdi's mature musical style. Of course, if you know the level of perfection that Maestro Verdi reaches with Othello and later with Falstaff, you then again feel like this short phrase around taking adaptation of Shakespeare just happens to mix with Verdi's mature musical style, and it still feels poor, it still feels shallow. Verdi, for some reason, and don't ask me why, ChatGPT gives us a paragraph on Verdi and the society, and here he mentions that Verdi was not just a musician, but he was also a prominent figure in Italian society. This one is very important. As Italy struggled for unification and independence, Verdi's music became intertwined with the political scene. His operas, particularly those from his early and middle periods, frequently contain themes of liberty, resistance against oppression, and the human quest for justice and love. This made him an unofficial representative of Italian nationalism, even if Verdi himself was more focused on artistry than political statements. Here, I think that even though ChatGPT is sharing something that is very true, Verdi is seen as a symbol of the Risorgimento and the unification of Italy. It is not true that he was more a musician than a political. If you go back and check on Verdi's biography, you may learn that he in fact had or played, for a very short period of time, played a role in the local government. He played as a part of a government. And he did it because he really was very interested not only in the unification of Italy, but in the well-doing the things by the government itself. We can see, or I will mention it a little later, that even La Casa di Riposo, for which he founded, part of his heritage, La Casa di Riposo is not only the recognition for musicians, but his understanding that the government would never take care of musicians. That's what Maestro Verdi did. He always worked on what he believed was right and whatever he believed was necessary to do. La Casa di Riposo is not only that place for musicians and artists to spend their last days, is his solution to an actual problem, a problem for which politicians would never care. His first presentation of 500 words by ChatGPT ended up with 3 paragraphs that are nothing but a vague platitude. It's platitude after platitude, adjectives here, phrases that end up meaning everything but nothing, and this is what disgusts me the most. I will read you one phrase. In conclusion, Giuseppe Verdi was more than just a composer. He was a national hero, an innovator, and a beacon of the Romantic era. His works not only defined Italian opera, but also continue to touch hearts around the world, transcending cultural and temporal boundaries. As long as there's a love for opera, there will be a reverence for Verdi. Nothing but platitudes here. So, as I was not satisfied with what was presented to me, then I went to another question. Because if you are familiar with opera, you know that you can easily or you can immediately identify when it is a Verdian opera. His orchestration, the way he uses voices, the way he shows, puts conflict on stage, it's just Verdi. You understand when it's Verdi. So I asked, how can Verdi's style be characterized? And the answer that I got from ChatGPT to my question is a mix of emotions in my side, because I feel that some of the parts that are presented to us are very assertive, while others are nothing but a waste of time. So the answer starts telling us that Giuseppe Verdi, platitude, Giuseppe Verdi's operatic style is a culmination of the bel canto tradition of the early 19th century and the innovations he introduced responding to the changing tastes and demands of his time. That really doesn't mean anything. What we should mention is that the early operas, of course, he was a young composer. Of course, he was to find himself, even though he was Verdi throughout his life. Of course, when young, he was influenced by Rossini and Donizetti. They were the two master composers of Italy. Where else would he get his influence but from the two masters from Italy, of course, and masters of the bel canto, such as Rossini and Donizetti? Of course, more than just the platitude presented to us by ChatGPT. His style evolved, and I quote, considerably throughout his career. Of course, it evolved. Everybody knows that a composer evolves throughout their lives, right? And then ChatGPT proposes Verdi's style to be characterized into 8 points. First one, melodic genius. Verdi's melodies are unmistakably memorable. Platitude. They are characterized by their lyricism, simplicity, and emotional depth, making them easily accessible and resonant with audiences. Well, does not really tell me much. Dramatic intensity. So very true. So very true. Point in favor of ChatGPT. Verdi prioritized drama. He often chose stories with strong emotional content and psychological depth. His operas are not just a series of beautiful arias and choruses, but are tightly integrated dramatic entities. This dramatic focus led to a more fluid integration of recitative, a song dialogue, and aria, blurring the boundaries and allowing for more natural transitions. I would not fully agree with the last statement, because Verdi, in his early stages, not at the end, because that's in fact what his evolution proves, but in his early stages, you could clearly see what was the recitativo part, the aria, the cavatina or cavaletta, and the duets, and then the continuation of the drama. It was, like putting square B after A, and then putting square C, and then progressing on D. So that way, the way he used to compose in his early and even in the middle stages of his career was very, if we can say, we could predict what could come next, which I will talk about it a little later, is very different as he evolves, as he proves in Othello and Falstaff. Orchestration, point 3. Verdi had a keen understanding of orchestration. He used the orchestra not just as a backdrop for the singers, but as an essential voice in drama. While his early works rely on traditional orchestra coloring, his later operas, like Othello and Falstaff, exhibit a richer, more nuanced orchestral texture. Okay, this part, number 3, from 0 to 10, I would say an 8. Vocal writing, stemming from the bel canto tradition, Verdi wrote parts that were vocally demanding. So very true. People or singers know that the only way to sing Verismo and the only way to sing Verdi is to have voice. You cannot get away with a Verdi opera if you don't have a voice. His works require singers to have a strong command of their voices, able to deliver both the delicate lyrical passages and the powerful dramatic moments. Okay, number 4, I would give it an 8. Number 5, choral innovations. Verdi had a special knack for choral writing. Operas like Nabucco feature choruses that play a central role in the drama. True. The famous Va Pensiero, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Number 6, character development. Unlike some of his predecessors, Verdi paid significant attention to the psychological depth of his characters. His protagonists are multifaceted, with personal struggles, desires, and flaws, making them relatable and human. Yes, I would give it a 9 to that point. Variety in themes, but we have to mention, before I jump to variety in themes, that character development has to do with the works on which he bases his operas. Recall or remember that he based several of them on Shakespeare's compositions, for instance. And of course, if you are basing your work on Shakespeare's, you are taking a very good starting point as Shakespeare, is one of the masters of the world literature of all times. Number 7, variety in themes. While Verdi's operas often touch on universal themes like love, betrayal, and vengeance, he also incorporated contemporary and political subjects. Works like Un ballo in maschera, which we have presented in the previous series, Don Carlos, which we also presented, integrate political intrigue and personal drama, making them both timely and timeless. A platitude in number 7, so I would give it maybe also a 7. And finally, evolution and adaptability. Over his long career, Verdi adapted to and sometimes led changes in musical tastes. His early works, rooted in the bel canto style, I mentioned that myself, of course, coming from Rossini and Donizetti. That's the way, even though with his style he would still write, we called him the bel cantista Verdi. Then he transitioned to the more dramatic and integrated middle period operas, and finally to his late masterpieces, which showcased a synthesis of his entire career while incorporating Wagnerian influences and innovative harmonic languages. Here, especially here, many people would not like what ChatGPT proposes, and I know that it has been a discussion for decades already. People tend to say that Maestro Verdi evolved, but that he evolved and at the end he joined Wagner in the sense of the use of the leitmotif. They say that at the end both Wagner and Maestro Verdi find a common point in the same purpose and use of the leitmotif, making the transitions between the solos, the duets, the trios almost imperceptible. There is not anymore these minutes for a singer or a group of singers to sing a purpose, but now the whole drama is integrated within the complete or throughout the complete opera. For many, this is not only not true, but this is also a way of offending Maestro Verdi, because they say that Maestro Verdi ended up being like an Italian Wagner, which is absolutely not true. Verdi evolved the way he had to evolve, based on his experiences, on his story, on his own life, or the things he learned from his early compositions. And for me, it is oversimplistic to just say that he was like an Italian Wagner who ended up composing the way Wagner said it had to be. So because of that, in the evolution and adaptability, I will give only 2 points out of 10 to this part of the response of ChatGPT. The last paragraph I will not even bother to mention because, my God, it's again another platitude. And I was mentioning earlier and that I was not satisfied with the 500 words summary presented by ChatGPT, and I also thought that it would be important to mention, and you may be familiar with this expression of a Verdian baritone. Because if you know Verdi, you know that Verdi had a predilection for the baritone tessiture. So baritones in the compositions, in the operas by Maestro Verdi, are very important. So how does ChatGPT define this Verdian baritone? And says, a Verdian baritone refers to a specific type of baritone voice that excels in the roles written by Giuseppe Verdi. Obvious, right? These roles are known for their vocal demands and the significant dramatic weight they carry in Verdi's operas. Let's see if ChatGPT provides further information on this. Range. While the baritone voice typically sits between the bass and the tenor voices, a Verdian baritone must have a wide range to manage Verdi's demanding vocal lines, especially in the upper register. The timbre. Verdian roles demand a rich, warm, and robust vocal quality. The voice should possess a heroic or noble quality, especially roles like Rigoletto or Simon Boccanegra. Dramatic intensity. Verdi's baritone roles are often at the heart of the opera's drama. As a result, a Verdian baritone must be an exceptional actor, capable of conveying deep and often conflicting emotions. That is true. That one I liked. Stamina. Given the length and the intensity of Verdi's operas, a Verdian baritone needs exceptional vocal stamina to maintain strength and quality throughout the performance. That is very, very true. Agility. Despite the need for power and dramatic weight, these roles also require a certain agility, as Verdi's vocal lines can be intricate and fast-paced. Yes, I would like to give you 2 examples here, because if not, I will lose the purpose of sharing it. Let me give you 2 examples of these agilities. And I was telling you, with this example, I do not want to say that Verdi wanted to imitate Rossini in the way he composed. But if you recall Rossini in Largo al Factotum, but in the middle part of the Largo al Factotum, if you recall, there is this, and if you recall Il Conte de Luna, there is a part, or there is more than one part, because Il Conte de Luna is even, of course, being a Verdian baritone with all the characteristics that we have just mentioned, he needs to sing very, very fast and, if not repetitive, at least like something that would remind us of the style of the bel canto. Geloso amor sprezzato, arde in me tremendo il fuoco, il tuo sangue ho sciagonato, a difenderlo fia poco, dirgli a folle, io t'amo, ardisti, e in più vivere non può, a cento proferisti, che a morir lo condannò a 100 proteristichi a morir, lo condannò. Of course, you could say that after this part, of course, I am referring to the final part of the first act of Il Trovatore. You can say that it is very similar for the tenor and the soprano. But going back to the baritone, it is very particular the way he uses the voice of Il Conte di Luna in Il Trovatore, because, as I was just mentioning, it is not now, in the years of Verdi, it is not now that very common to use the baritone for those fast-paced either arias or duets. If you recall also the duet, now making reference to Donizetti's duet between Lucia and her brother, there is also, in the scene of Il Palor Funesto Orrendo, there is also a part where the two of them are singing together and somehow can remind us of the duet between Rigoletto and Gilda. If you remember the vendetta, si tremenda, si vendetta, tremenda vendetta. I think you may have already recalled that, right? Si vendetta, tremenda vendetta, di quell'anime solo desio, di punirti allora s'affretta. La 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 la. If you go back to Donizetti's Il Palor Funesto Orrendo and the duet by Lucia and her brother, you may find somehow the influence of Donizetti, which is more noticeable at the end of the Si Vendetta, Tremenda Vendetta in Rigoletto. Because if you go to the final part of the duet, they go when the two of them join their voices, they sing significantly faster than what they were doing earlier with the two voices joined together. This duet by a baritone and a soprano is not the only time it is going to happen. But it resembles more to Donizetti's in Lucia's because it is a baritone and it is a light voice of soprano, Lucia and Gilda. Because you could also say that it also happens in Nabucco, in the duet of Nabucco himself and the not much and the not loved by anybody daughter. Of course, I am referring to Abigail, but Abigail is a dramatic soprano. So the duet between, even though, if you recall that program, I also mentioned that it has some part of bel canto, but the style of bel canto is different because the heavy voice of Abigail, but in the case, going back to Rigoletto, it is similar to Lucia because Lucia and Gilda are light sopranos. Si vendetta, si vendetta, si verrà, and he also uses the same effect as it happens usually in the duets, which is that the soprano goes for her high note, which I don't recall if the written note is an A, and the baritone, I don't recall whether it is an E. But usually singers, when they have the notes, they extrapolate, and the soprano could go maybe for a D, and the baritone could go as high as an A. And it is very impressive, right? Because after the da 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 da, then the soprano could go for her high note, da da. And then when she finishes her note, then goes the baritone, full voice, a powerful baritone, with a high note that he can reach. So it is usually very effective. If you would like to, and it is only for the purpose of comparisons. I am not saying, I would like to repeat, I don't want to say that Conte di Luna is inspired on Figaro, or that the duets are based on Rossini's Lucia. Now, what I am trying to share with you is that Verdi at this stage comes from a bel canto understanding of music. Okay? And the last, number six, sorry, the strong lower register. According to ChatGPT, while many of the roles require a soaring top range, a Verdian baritone also needs a solid and resonant lower register. I would like to complete ChatGPT's comment sharing with you that the Verdian baritone not only needs high notes, powerful high notes, not only does it need strong lower register, but also middle voice. A Verdian baritone has to be very solid in the complete range of his voice. Otherwise, he will not be able to get away with the role. And ChatGPT proposes the following Verdian baritone roles. Rigoletto. Of course, Rigoletto himself. If you recall the main pieces or the main numbers for Rigoletto, and I shared with you that Verdi really loved this tessitura, some of the greatest arias for a baritone are here in Rigoletto. If you recall, prior to the duet with Gilda, his first duet, he sings, and after having met Sparafucilli, he says, "Io la lingua e la il pugnale." He would also move then for the duet with Gilda, "Figlia mio padre," and then the rest of the emotion would move. He would then wrap the act when he finds that he has been treasoned, and he shouts, "Gilda, mia Gilda!" After that, "Gilda, mia Gilda, dove mia figlia, what has happened to my daughter?" He shouts, "Ah, la maledizione!" And that way he shouts "La maledizione" needs to be believable. He would then have the confrontation with the rest of the court, the ones who support. Remember that Rigoletto is around a very miserable guy, Il Duca de Mantua, so he needs to confront those guys that support Il Duca de Mantua, and there is a very dramatic aria there that is "Cortigiani, vi razza dannata," one of the most dramatic arias ever written for a baritone, a jewel for a baritone. Then later on, the duet with Gilda, "Si vendetta tremenda vendetta," which we have just talked about. And the opera will end with the closing words, making reference again to the maledizione. Again, "Ah, la maledizione," after having found that Gilda was killed instead of Il Duca de Mantua. Macbeth, which we have also had a program on Macbeth. Even though we talked a lot about Lady Macbeth, we also need to talk about the role of Macbetto in that opera, which is also a very interesting role, based also on a Shakespearean role. Again, ChatGPT mentions il Conte di Luna, which we talked about in Il Trovatore. We have Renato in Un ballo in maschera. We have had already a program on Un ballo in maschera. You would like to refer to Renato. Renato is key to the plot of that opera. and Rodrigo in Don Carlo. Don Carlo Don Carlo cannot be understood without the role of Rodrigo, another role that has one of the greatest arias ever written for a baritone. And these are the only roles that at least ChatGPT mentions for the creation of Verdi, but we know that each of the operas by Maestro Verdi implies a very powerful role for a baritone. And let's close our first program on ChatGPT, Maestro Verdi, according to ChatGPT. Let's wrap up our first programs with my last question because I really didn't feel that much satisfied. And I asked ChatGPT to provide Giuseppe Verdi's creations, Giuseppe Verdi's compositions in chronological order. What is presented now is the order of operas, is not the order of other compositions, as you may already know. La Messa di Requiem by Maestro Verdi, also very well known, is not part of that list. Okay, let's get started. So, ChatGPT shares with us Oberto, Conte di San Bonifacio, 1839, which very few people know. Un giorno di regno, very, very interesting opera. If you have the chance of watching it, also a very bel cantista Verdi. There is a recording with Jose Carreras, which I think is splendid if you have the chance. Nabucco, 1842. I Lombardi alla prima crociata, 1843. Hernani, 1844. I due Foscari, 1844. I skipped Hernani, but let's go back to Hernani because you may recall Hernani for the aria of the soprano. Hernani, Hernani, vollami, al tuo leggiadro sospetto, taranta, tarara, ridere, that aria and its respective cavalletta for the soprano in Hernani, of course, as well as the way the crescendos and the concertantes are built in Maestro Verdi make it a very interesting opera. Of course, very, very interesting for the Verdi, the baritone role as well. The Foscari that I just mentioned, Giovanna d'Arco, which very few people know, 1845. Alzira, 1845 as well. Attila, of which there is mostly only one aria, and moreover the cavalletta by the soprano that is known for Attila, which I would also say it's a very interesting opera. If you have the chance of watching it, you may find a couple of jewels in Maestro Verdi's composition. Then we have Macbeth, which we have presented in our previous series. I Masnadieri, which also is very unknown, hardly ever represented, and that has in the voice of Joan Sutherland's that brought to a concert, not that often, but she included it, the Carlo vive, so if you have the chance of looking in the YouTube or in your recordings, if you have it and you recall it, Joan Sutherland singing Carlo Vive from the opera I Masnadieri by Maestro Giuseppe Verdi, which is very interesting because it is 1847 and it is a very bel cantista style aria. 1847, Jerusalem, a rework of I Lombardi. Then comes also a not well-known opera, Il Corsaro, 1848. But Il Corsaro has such a beautiful aria for the soprano, which you can find if you look for it in YouTube. I already noticed that it is there. In the voice of Maria Callas. You know that once Maria Callas started having the vocal problems and that she retired from stage, she did recordings that were not commercially available and that are not openly commercially available as of nowadays. But she did those recordings, and out of those recordings, you find this aria in Il Corsaro that is absolutely beauty. Also, you can find a version of it in the voice of Maestra Montserrat Caballé. The aria is known under the name of Non sole tetra immagine, accompanied by an harp. This aria is so beautiful. I really believe this is one of the most beautiful arias ever composed by Maestro. Not only by Maestro Verdi himself, but for the whole repertory of the sopranos. Non sole tetre immagine tarararararia la 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 la. Moving on, 1849, La Battaglia di Legnano, very not well known. Stifelio in 1850, revised as Haroldo, 1857. If you also have the chance of watching Stifelio, it's a very interesting one. And then we reach the top three. Rigoletto, Il Trovatore, La Traviata. La Traviata among the top 5 operas ever represented every year throughout the world. From the prelude of the opera, which usually is played by the orchestra in recitals, and that gives us some of the moments that will be played later. Di quell'amor e palpito dell'universo intero misterioso, and giving us two of the most well-known lovers of the whole opera history of opera. Of course, I am talking of La Traviata herself, Violetta Valéry, and the man she ends up loving. Of course, I am referring to Alfredo Germont. We have then Le Vepres Siciliani in French, the Italian version, I Vespri Siciliani, which has several numbers. It's a very long opera, but that has very several numbers, very well known, not that often sung by sopranos. 1855. Another icon for the baritone tessitura, Simon Boccanegra, 1857 in his first edition, and a later revision in 1881. Aroldo, which we mentioned earlier, is a revision of Stifelio. We have Un ballo in maschera, which we presented also in our previous series, 1859. La forza del destino, 1862, first revision. Later in 1869, which we also presented in our previous series. Don Carlos, or Don Carlo, 1867, fantastic opera, of course. Aida, which was our opening program, unfortunately with problems in the audio, but Aida, 1871. Othello, also presented in our previous series, 1887. And the latest and last composition, Falstaff, 1893. And I think that at this point, to wrap up today's program, I have to say, to go back to what I shared with you earlier, around me finding the 500 words introduction to Giuseppe Verdi a little too shallow. Why do I say that it is shallow? It puts Maestro Verdi in terms as if, well, things just happened and evolved. And if you happen to have the chance of reading books or watching documentaries on the biography of Maestro Verdi, you will identify that Maestro Verdi cannot be understood without knowing that the loss of his family, Margarita Barezzi, his first wife, and his children deeply impacts Maestro Verdi, deeply changes the way he perceives and puts drama in place. Maestro Verdi struggles with the loss of his children, and so the conflict between fathers and sons is always throughout his compositions. Not mentioning the role of that loss is not understanding Maestro Verdi. Now, also not mentioning that not only he was rejected by the Milan Conservatory, he had very hard times. His first years of composition, his dark years, as he used to call them, los años de galera, which he had barely money to eat. He kept composing, but he was not supported. He didn't have the support he needed, only supported by Maestro Barezzi, by the way, but not being taken seriously by anyone in the Italy of those years. As he starts gaining recognition and he ends up being a wealthy man, one of the very few exceptions in the world of opera composers, he ends his life being a wealthy man. He gives it, as I was sharing with you earlier, to La Casa de Riposo. The only way you can write to the emotions of people is having those emotions so deep inside yourself. And that was Maestro Verdi. He was able to compose, to make people cry, to make people feel moved, because Maestro Verdi was moved by the emotions of humans. He understood them, and he was smart and a genius himself to be able to put it on the stage and to make now, over a century after him having deceased, to keep remembering him. I also mentioned in a previous program that one cannot understand Maestro Verdi without the influence of his long life companion. Of course, I'm referring to Giuseppina Strepponi. Giuseppina Strepponi played a major role in the life of Maestro Verdi. So for me, not making reference to that first life that he had with his family, with the Barezzi, Margherita Barezzi, and the role of Giuseppina Strepponi in the life of Maestro Verdi are just unforgivable. Based on that, I would like to say that in a scale from 0 to 10, I could say that I am satisfied with the responses of ChatGPT. I could give it a score of 6 out of 10. I really feel it misses the point. I feel it is full of platitudes. Maybe for a very early opera lover, this would work. But if you love opera as much as I love it, you just don't find it enough. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next program.